actual actualizer as a theorem. I missed
Okay,
that one.
are you familiar with Aristotle's argument about actualizing in potential?
Yeah, but that's not a logic. That's just an argument.
Yeah, it is logic. No, it is because
Okay, if you accept yes,
so if you go from if something so like if okay, I'll demonstrate it with this. This is
I mean, I guess if you just say all the premises are axioms, then I mean,
I
shit.
have the potential to you have the potential to be punched in the face, right? But you haven't have that potential actualized at this point. But I can actualize that potential by punching you in the face. That's logic,
no, man,
Dude,
not this.
It's
I
actually
don't
a
actually
strong
know
argument.
Oh,
Well, I don't
man,
actually
this
know what potential
Thomism stuff, bro.
means.
No, it's not Thomism. It's called Aristotelianism, mate.
Aristotelianism. I'm tired.
Yeah,
I know what you're talking about.
You know Thomas Aquinas was Thomas
No, you
Aquinas.
guys are
What's,
jumbling up with the different philosophers.
Oh, look.
No,
Where
Thomas
do you
Aquinas.
guys-
But how does? But that
where do
view
you find the
leads
flaw
to.
in
But
the
that view. But that view leads to modal collapse if you take it to its logical entailment. So it's just a silly argument.
Well, it depends on what he means. Wait, no, I think it depends on what he
Hold
means
up,
with
hold up. Let's see what you have
potential.
to
I don't
say.
think he means it in like a modal.
It does.
But
But how is he?
the
Yeah,
idea
explain,
is
Jack.
that-
Explain.
Because the idea is that God has no unactualized potentials.
Boom!
So
You got it, Jack.
It does entail modal collapse.
How did
I've missed you so much here.
I did not hear what you said properly. What are you saying?
I said if God contains no unactualized potentials, that means that the only possible world is the actual.
Right.
And
Jack,
that's
Wait,
necessitarian.
The only possible
I
world
don't think that
for
follows
what?
at all.
Do you know that God is pure actuality, right?
What does that even
That's
mean?
what I'm saying.
Right. What Jack is saying is that if God can actualize all potentials, right, that would
No,
leave.
if God has no unactualized
No, I meant if
potential.
God has no unactualized potentials, right, that means God can exist in only one possible, which means he can't be omnipotent. So it's incoherent for you to say that.
What I was saying was maybe
It's not that he can't be omnipotent. It just means that necessitarianism.
I was going to say
wait, Jack, but necessitarianism is.
Wait, hold on. Are we going to change gears? Because I was saying that the
I actually don't think this is a good argument.
purely actualizer is logical, and then you were moving on to God's omnipotence, right? Which is from the Bible, and you're attacking the idea of omnipotence. I'm not talking about omnipotence. I was talking about the fact that the purely actualizer is the logical conclusion of change. Yes, and it is.
Wait,
And you did not address that. You didn't address that. You said that
Only if you-
omnipotence cannot be legit because of God can only be doing one thing, only be at one place at one time. So therefore, he isn't omnipotent.
You would have to also accept the principles.
God can only be at one place at one time. What are you talking about, dude?
That's
I want to hear the argument for necessitarianism because I don't think it works.
No, so I think Detroit. I think what they're saying is that if we take potential here to just mean like contingent some possibility. Right? Then
but hang on, God does have some potencies, but they're passive potencies. That's right. He just has no active potencies. And other things in the world can.
The Bible lists
some of
things
those
God
passive
cannot
potencies
do.
may or may not be actualized. And so
No.
he can exist. In
No. So the idea is if pure act means that God has no unactualized potentials, then necessitarianism would.
How?
Well, I guess the idea is that there's no world in which God could be any different.
Thomas would say that God's one.
Yeah, there is. Well, but so there's another world in which he has different passive potencies actualized, right? Either actualized or not.
So what is necessitarianism?
But if God has, I forgot the phrase, but no, if God has, doesn't have any unactualized potentials, right? Then what other world would there be to appeal to?
Well, what the Thomas would probably.
No. When we talk about unactualized potentials, the Thomas is going to say you have to distinguish whether you're talking about passive or active potency. And they're going to say that, yeah, God doesn't have any unactualized active potencies. But he does, or at least might have, unactualized passive potencies. And those are going to ground.
It has to do with a real
It has to do with
world.
Right, the Cambridge change. So it's going to be something to do with
Impassibility.
So I think like one of my passive, for example, the punching one is a passive potency. My potentiality to be punched by you, or to become shorter than you, or to I don't know, some other extrinsic, Cambridge
Often a
relation.
teacher.
Those are all passive potencies, and it's not required.
Sorry.
Right, and it's not required of me that I have some active potency in order to have that passive potency.
Another typical example is like the teacher and the student. The student is changed, but the teacher is not changed.
Right, so they're going to say that God has many different passive potencies that depend on his relation to other things in the world. Some people think even the creation of the world is, well, let me not get into that. So, for example, that you know God, for example, that as God is known by you, is a passive potency of God. But it's, and there's it follows that there can be a possible world in which that passive potency is actualized, and one in which it isn't. But it's no problem that God still doesn't have any. It's not that it doesn't follow that God has any unactualized active potency.
There's no change in God there because it's not a real relation.
Right.
I don't understand it. So God has a reason for actualizing one world rather than another.
His free choice.
Well,
on a model where he chooses freely.
Right. So depending on exactly goes into actualization of the world. If he's really actualizing everything, then I don't see how. And if that's an active potency, which I think it is, although there's some people. Well, what I started to say a second ago, but I didn't want to get into because it's really weird, is that some people think that God's creative act, or that God created this world, really wasn't actually one of his active potencies, but was a passive potency somehow.
I would say that it's actus purus just would entail that God has one singular free act of creation, even though there's a time dimension in creation. So he's eternally or timelessly one act. He is that act.
Right, but
that is a free act.
But if this is the point, right, that the act, if the act could be different, right, then it seems like there's God has a different active potency that he didn't actualize when he created the world as it actually is.
I suppose you could say that can say in our minds, like we can imagine it being different, but since there is only ever one act, then that's what the act is. It doesn't mean it wasn't a freely willed act.
Well, regardless whether we call it free, I mean, this would be the argument from necessitarianism, which some people try to get around with the way I just said, that to construe that act as not active. But if okay, God has the potential. Well, we don't say the potential. God created the world. If he could have created the world otherwise, right? If the world could have been some other way, that must mean that he had the potential that wasn't actualized to create it in that way, right? Because he created it this way, so he didn't create it the other way. But this would just to say that he has an unactualized potential.
Yeah, I've heard this objection, and I've heard answers to it, but I forget them.
but I mean, what's
right?
the problem?
The answer that I heard was, well, it's only a problem if you're not if you're willing to bite the bullet on necessitarianism, then it's not much of a problem.
Well, they can't bite the bullet on that if they're Catholic.
Or accept that he has unactualized potential.
Well,
the other response, which I find really strange, is to say that, well, there is this potential that the world could have been made a different way by God, but it's not really an active potency, merely a passive one somehow. But I really don't understand that view. In fact, I think Phaser wrote on that. I think Phaser wrote on that. I think some other people commented similar things, but it just doesn't make any sense to me.
It doesn't make any sense to anyone.
If anything's going to be an active potency, it's going to be the creation of the whole world, right? I just don't understand how that.
You're not the only one who doesn't understand.
But
So
Jack, you saw
Detroit.
how I came out of nowhere with that modal collapse objective. Like no one expected that.
You're a ninja.
Yeah,
So
Yuri,
the-
that's a debate that's been like going on
Yuri's
for like a year or
So
two.
do you
like,
guys
all
believe
over.
that
And
there has to
you're
be
the
a
same
purely
color
accurate
as a
actualizer?
ninja.
Oh, nice, Jack.
Oh shit!
Yellow?
I'm not
What
ninja.
Ninjas are dressed all in black.
Yellow.
That was the obvious answer. I tried to find a different.
So do you guys believe there has to be a purely actualizer?
I do.
You do?
Yeah, I'm a Thomist. I mean, I'm something like a Thomist. I don't know what else.
Yeah.
But
Wait,
then
I
God
thought
couldn't have
the whole
created.
point was that even if you were a Thomist, you have to say that there's passive potencies. There's nothing that's actually purely actual, right?
Well,
Yeah.
what they
They-
mean by
Passive,
actual.
passive potencies would
What they
not
mean,
be defined.
so it's kind of an equivocation. By purely actual, they mean purely actively actual, like pure.
Yeah. That it has no active potencies.
It means it's really tied up with immutability as well and timelessness. So, I mean, there's nothing that can be. There is no possible change.
I'm not sure how that.
There's no
related,
change
but,
possible in God because if he has no potencies.
That doesn't. I don't think that
Right.
matters.
No intrinsic change. No real changes, they might say. But it can still be those
Well,
external.
I guess it matters.
changes.
Yeah, I was
So
going to say. I guess it
everybody here
matters. Since
understands
all of God's properties are essential properties.
Everybody understands Cambridge change here.
Yeah. But,
Probably.
well, I can't speak for everybody, but that was more or less the thing I was talking about earlier. You know, me becoming shorter than you, or me becoming less wealthy than you, whatever.
There's
Those
no
are some of the
change
changes.
happening to you.
If the intrinsic change is only in you, then I'm experiencing some extrinsic change, like a change relative to you, for example. But we call that Cambridge or extrinsic change because nothing really about me.
This argument for an purely actualizer doesn't have anything to do with necessitarianism, so that's not a good objection anyway. It's just a non sequitur. It's a red herring.
Well, it's not. Well, okay. It's kind of sort of what we might call an ad hom in a sense. So if we think that if you're committed to the falsehood of necessitarianism, right? If you think there's other ways the world could have been, then this is going to be a good objection to the Thomists or anyone who uses this sort of argument.
No, it might make you question one of your two beliefs, but it's still not going to be.
That's why he said it was like an ad
not an
hom,
objection,
right?
It's not an objection to the logic of the.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that you can bring these things
Right.
up, right? But then it doesn't like affect the anvil of purely actualizer. It's just
No,
it's
of
just like a
course.
hammer. No. Well, hold up. It's just like a hammer smashing against the anvil. It doesn't matter because of its like the logic of purely actualizer is already set in stone, and you're basically bringing up something which we just don't know. It's
Right,
it's
and
similar to the whole
Christians accept
can
mystery
God
anyway.
make a hold up. It's similar to the whole can God make a rock which he cannot lift? It's the same as that. We don't understand or we don't know, but does that throw the whole entire thing out the window? No, it doesn't. It hardly does
Well,
anything. It's just
hang
an
on.
unanswered question.
Not to mention
So it depends.
Not to mention.
Well, okay, but
Go ahead.
no, sorry.
I'm saying not to mention that all Christians accept that there are certain pure mysteries, right? Like the Trinity. So it wouldn't bother us if we found it mysterious how God could freely create, even though he has no, we could just put that in the mystery category.
I mean, you can put contradictions in the mystery category too.
No, I don't think we could do that. I don't think we could put pure contradictions in it. We could say there's some things beyond.
Detroit is saying this is a pure contradiction.
B3, why don't you take that
Vento
position
does
that he has unactualized?
Sorry, Jar.
Why don't you take the position that he has unactualized potentials?
Oh, why don't I say that God's because then whatever is then the actualizer of his potentials would be a further cause, so that caused him.
Wait, what? How does that follow?
It's late and I'm tired. I'm sure if I put it in a better way, I'll put it in better words.
Does that follow, Detroit?
Well, he's assuming that every act.
No, because
It
you were
would, it would
saying
involve another premise that I'd have
He's
to.
assuming that everything that is actualized requires some external actualizer.
Hmm?
Anything,
Wait, everything that is
anything that
actualized.
goes
Wait,
from
what did you say?
potential to
Everything that is actualized requires some external actualizer. Who? What?
anything that goes from potential to actual requires an
Mm.
actualizer. So eventually,
Yeah.
unless you want an infinite regress, and this is not a chronological or temporal regress, this
Is
is
that kind of a way to state like the
Okay.
PSR?
You don't need to go
But like,
from you don't need to argue from series, because if you have a series of actualizations, but you also have a hierarchy of actualizations. A hierarchy
yeah,
means
no.
that the purely actual actualizer exists from something like a chandelier. And it sounds a bit weird, but if you think about it, you say, what holds up the chandelier? Okay, well, what holds that up? The chain. What holds the chain up? Okay, the bearings. What holds the bearings up? The ceiling. What holds the ceiling up? The pillars outside the house. What holds the pillars outside the house? The foundations. What holds the foundations up? The earth. What holds the earth up? And then you've gotten to that the earth needs to be constantly actualized for everything to stay in place. If you remove the earth, for instance, everything will just fall off. Or if you
right,
remove the foundation, everything will collapse, right? It's not like it's different to a series of things, because it's
temporal
not
series.
an infinite regress, right? You can trace it
No,
back to,
it's
say,
still
the
an
earth, and
infinite.
then say that the earth has to
You-
be
I was saying
constantly actualized by some purely actual actualizer.
what
So
is a
that's
series? It's just a
yeah,
that
that's
was
what
a
the
series of relations between objects, right?
that was the answer I was giving to whoever asked me why not just believe in some other actualizer. You have to get to an endpoint, otherwise otherwise you have an infinite regress, not in time
yeah.
but simultaneously. And if you want to bite that bullet and say that even without a first actualizer you can have that infinite regress, then you just reject the premise. So, and then
Yeah.
if you don't share the mutual axiom, then the argument's not going to work for you. But
I
it's
don't know too much about Thomistic, blah blah blah, whatever.
You know enough.
What is actualizer really referring to here? Because is it like something? Is it like an explanatory?
That which brings something from potentiality into actuality.
Okay. So I'll change the
That which brings
terminology
it.
so that it's in
But
layman's
again, well,
terms so you can
that
understand. So basically, potential, you know what potential means. So, like, for instance, obviously this is no brainer, but like coffee has the potential to go from hot to being cold, a change in temperature. And then actualization is basically the realization, or the uh uh what should you say? Well, the actualization of that potential.
fulfillment.
So yeah, it's basically bringing it into reality. And
yeah,
actualizing
wait,
doesn't
why
actually need to be in an
suppose
It
instant,
actually
right?
that
is similar to the PSR in a way.
why? Yeah, I was gonna
Uh,
say why suppose that all act like actual things require an actualizer. I'm not
All
following.
things that go from potential to actual.
Wait,
yeah.
right.
The very conclusion is that there is one final thing that's purely actual and doesn't change, and that's the thing at the
Well, it's
bottom.
not purely actual.
That's what
It has but
would not have potential. No.
what are you talking about? Of course it would. Like I'm actual, right? But I have some potentials, presumably, right?
So you're not purely actual. That's why it's pure act.
I'm so confused.
You're actual.
God is taken to be pure act.
No, I get that, but I thought he was saying this is true for everything that's okay. No. So wait, I'm still confused.
No, in the Thomistic
Why
view,
why would
things
everything that is actualized require an actualizer? That's what I'm wondering.
look in the Thomistic view. Things, finite things, material things have um, matter and form, or they have existence and essence, or they have actuality and potentiality. Right. So right now you're actually talking to us. You have the potential to go to sleep later. Like, so you could be changed. Now, at the end, unless you have an infinite regress of similar things that are potential and actual, you have to eventually start at a final, purely actual being to get the
Wait,
whole
no, that
meaning.
just doesn't follow. So no, you're assuming that every actualized thing has an actualizer.
Well,
That's
then,
what I'm wondering. Why would we think that?
if there were something that could go from potential to actual and change without a cause, then you're into brute fact territory.
Right. So what?
So
Yeah, that's what that's what I'm asking.
if you just embrace brute facts and to reject the principle of sufficient reason, then that's fine, and you're not going to accept the argument. But most people would say that's a high cost. I would say it's
What
high.
are you talking about? Most people reject the PSR.
I don't think that's true.
What? Most philosophers
Dude,
think the PSR is
atheists
crazy.
use the principle of sufficient reason as like their groundworks for attacking theism. Do you understand?
No, they
They
don't.
go
Right.
like,
He's
"Well, the
actually
principle is
right
still
because
right." Do you
actually
understand
Craig's
that?
argument Craig's argument, as we know, relies on the PSR, right? But we all know that Craig's argument is actually an atheological argument, right?
Yeah, but if you look at someone like
Wait, wait,
Proust,
How are either of those things true?
I mean,
wait.
Jack, are you there, man?
Craig would say that the most brilliant and complete treatment of the PSR would be Alexander Proust, and he has like a softer. Now I don't know if
Proust is
that's true or
terrible.
not. Maybe you think he is, but that's Craig's opinion. So I mean, if you're going to refer to Craig, then you have to refer to the fact that the PSR he
Well,
defends.
I've read Proust's the thing from the
the PSR that he's defending is weaker than the Leibnizian.
Yeah.
Wait, what PSR does Craig rely on?
I don't remember how to formulate it, to be honest, at this hour.
No, Craig relies on a causal principle, not an explanatory.
Well, he has a causal principle in the Kalam argument, and then in the contingency argument, he has the principle of sufficient reason.
He doesn't really run the contingency argument very much, does he?
Is Craig known for doing that?
It's typically his third argument after the fine tuning. And
Third. He's famous for the Kalam mostly, but
yeah, he's not. I'm not saying he's doing great. He hasn't written any books on the PSR.
Craig likes every argument.
He does like it.
Sure.
He does like a lot.
But I was just wondering, why suppose the PSR? Like, why suppose?
Well, once
as we said before,
you say things don't need reasons, then I mean, maybe nothing has a reason. Maybe what you just said has no reason. Where are you gonna? What is your criteria for what things have reasons and what doesn't?
Wait, I don't see why that matters.
If things don't need if there are things that don't need reasons, then you're left in a position where how do you distinguish which things are caused and which aren't?
Why would that matter? Why would we need to distinguish them? I'm not sure how that.
Well, I'm just telling you one of the consequences.
One way or the other, whether the PSR is true.
Well, I'm just telling you that one of the consequences that follows rejection of it or the acceptance of brute facts would be that anything can happen, really. I mean, if things don't necessarily...
That doesn't follow at all.
Well, if things don't need causes to happen, then what's going to discriminate? What's going to determine? What is going to determine which things don't need to be determined?
That's not. What are you talking about? Determined. That has nothing to do.
Cause, determined, explained,
principle of
having a reason.
I'll define it for you and see where you're going. Okay, so you're saying that doesn't follow, that nothing can come out of that. You're saying that random things can occur. Okay, principle of sufficient reason is that everything that exists has to have an explanation. So if you're denying that, you're saying that everything that exists doesn't have to have an explanation. Some things can, but obviously not everything. So by that logic, that means that what you said doesn't follow actually does follow, because it means that since not everything has to have an explanation, that means that things without an explanation can be common.
Well, it doesn't follow that they are common. I mean,
yes, it does follow.
Suppose
the definition of PSR.
Well, I mean, you have no.
How does it follow that they are common?
The problem is you just don't have a basis to say something doesn't have a reason.
B3, the problem is you're appealing to consequences, and the consequences you're appealing to is like, well, how do we know what has an explanation, what doesn't? That's not a rebuttal.
You don't have the right to say something has no explanation, or I could just say the same thing. I could say what you just said has no explanation. If you don't have a reason for why, then anybody can say anything has no explanation.
Wait, but so what? That doesn't demonstrate that the PSR is true.
So that's the cost of rejecting the PSR. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying that's the cost of it. I could say what you just said.
When I asked you why I suppose the PSR is true, I was expecting you would give me a reason to think that it's true, but it seems like you're just saying.
You mean an epistemic reason?
I think it's a metaphysical. Intuition. I think it's a metaphysical intuition, along with others that we hold, that you just have to accept or reject on your own basis.
Well, most philosophers don't hold that intuition. Most philosophers think that the PSR.
Is there any?
Where do you get
that?
that?
Is there a survey on that?
I think most.
The Greek philosopher called Parmenides.
Do you have some survey or something?
Yeah,
are you familiar with that guy?
I mean, I'm familiar with his name.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the thing is that like that's when you're going into that guy's territory. It's like oh well, everything doesn't have to everything doesn't need an explanation. And basically his theory is that, okay, so something can't come from nothing, yes? And if something goes from potential to actual, that means that something has actually come from nothing, because where did the actuality come from? It's just a one state going to another state, just cause. So he's saying that change doesn't really exist.
Right.
But that's actually
Yeah,
very
isn't that
refutation. I'm not going to go into it.
Wait,
But
I'm
that's
so
what
confused.
Paul
What was
really
the
got
point?
into. You realize that?
What
that
was the point of
the
your statement? I don't understand.
the Parmenideans just denied that there's change because they didn't have the act potency distinction. So they just said that if there really was change, then you'd have something coming from nothing, but you can't. So maybe it's the Heraclitean is that you're thinking of, is the one who
What
said
are you all talking about? This has nothing to do with the conversation.
it does, but
Yes, it does.
maybe not in an abstract way. It's like a historical account.
Well, okay, yeah, but
But anyway, like I could just say what you just said had no reason or cause or explanation. I could
you
just
could say that, sure.
detach it from reality the same way you want to detach the first event from reality.
If you're just saying that we wouldn't be able to have justification for believing any particular fact or set of facts
I could
is
say
a brute fact or
every
isn't a brute fact, then well, you could say that, but you wouldn't have any justification, right?
But you don't have any justification for denying the PSR in any case. So why can't I deny it in every case? Neither of us has a justification to deny it at all.
We could say that it entails modal collapse, and that modal.
So what?
And that necessitarianism is false.
Let it entail modal collapse then. Why is necessitarianism false?
Aren't you? Wait, I thought you were somebody who was like.
It doesn't matter.
Sorry, I thought you were somebody who. I thought you were somebody who was going to accept libertarian free will.
That has nothing
Right?
to do with the argument. I mean, you could say that's a
What
consequence.
do you mean? If you accept libertarian free will,
Whether I do or don't isn't part of this argument.
See, the thing is, mate, is that you're changing gears. You're like, oh, well, that you're basing it off the assumption that he accepts libertarian theory. Whether he does or he doesn't, it doesn't matter, because that's not actually.
I could just state the premise as necessitarianism is false, right? And most people are going to accept that, like the vast majority of.
Well, because the vast majority of people do believe in freedom.
Then they don't accept the PSR.
They don't accept the PSR.
But a free act is caused by the agent. It's not without explanation. It's not like it's something coming out of nowhere.
No, libertarian free will is not compatible with the PSR.
Necessitarianism, yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Well, because the sufficient cause, or the sufficient reason for the act is the will of the person. So I think they are compatible.
Look, dude, if the PSR...
They couldn't have chosen otherwise. If necessitarianism is true...
If the PSR entails modal collapse...
You may be right about that. There may be no free will. I mean, that has nothing to do with the argument like Australian was saying.
What are you talking about? The whole point is that necessitarianism is false. PSR entails necessitarianism, so the PSR is false. What does that? That has everything to do with the argument.
Necessitarianism may be true, or you may be wrong in your conclusion that they're incompatible.
You're just denying a premise. That's fine. But what I'm saying is the vast majority of people...
You're
not changing the argument. This was the argument the entire time.
You question pretty much every single thing that we're saying. You go, what does it have to do with this? That's what you're doing. So you can't do a 180 and then say that we're going and denying something. You literally skeptic on every single point that we make.
No, I'm not. What are you talking about?
And then when you do, we justify it, and then you change the subject.
Aren't most philosophers determinists, though?
They're not necessitarians. There's only like 6.
A question.
I don't think most philosophers
how can one be a hard determinist without being a necessitarian? I mean, maybe it's obvious, but I'm tired and it's late, and I have.
Yeah, somebody could accept that. Somebody could accept that they're different.
What's that?
Somebody could accept that the laws of nature are contingent, or that the
initial condition.
Historical fact.
Yeah. I mean, initial conditions you can choose any condition, right? But it's initial.
But if every
initial conditions just encompasses natural laws, doesn't it?
Wouldn't you need
no?
If you had
you'd be like a metaphysical infinitist, right?
Meaning the concrete facts that are at the first moment of time or something like
Or just
Oh, okay. Yeah,
just
yeah.
Right, but first moment is kind of chosen arbitrarily there, right? Or you could choose any moment to get you the same thing.
it depends if moments are actually like discrete units or continuously divisible.
No, that's
Not right.
true. Well, no,
Maybe
it
We're just
does.
going
It
like a complete rabbit trail. That's what I'm saying.
is going to be a problem if there is like a state of the world as a whole at one time. I mean, that may just be like if relativity is correct, that might there may be no such thing.
Let me just back up to if you're a determinist. Again, if you believe that there's a necessary, if you believe the necessary thing and the determinism together, then doesn't that make you a necessitarian?
If you believe that the laws of nature and natural conditions are necessary, then it seems like it.
Right.
Even though you can call these later events contingent, they would ultimately be necessary, even though they were contingent on the previous event.
Unless you think that there's some other facts besides those encompassed by the laws of nature and the initial, the facts about the universe.
But I guess you could think that the physical world is determined, but there's some other things that aren't part of the physical world that could have been otherwise. I don't know.
So what things do you guys take not to be, not to have a reason?
Not to have a reason.
Right. If you reject the are there any particular things that you don't think have explanations or reasons? And maybe
I'm not
identified one of these.
I mean, one thing some people say is just the existence of the universe at all.
I don't think he has a cause, man. I don't know where he comes from.
Oh.
Well, you could be wouldn't metaphysical like infinitism stand in contrast to this idea?
I don't know what that is by the term.
What do you mean by metaphysical infinitism?
It's just like an infinite chain of things, like whether they be or like novel. That
usually an infinite regress of the cosmos or something.
Do you know
For
that
explanation.
Just an
things
infinite
cannot explain
past?
the existence of anything?
That was all garbled.
Sorry,
An infinite
he's talking about
series
infinite past.
cannot explain the existence of anything.
There could be an infinite past. It could be
you can have an infinite number of universes. Dude, no matter how long I make the paintbrush, it cannot explain anything.
What
are you talking about?
I don't see how that.
I
don't see how.
In other words,
what was supposed to be explanatory about
because
this?
this argument is also called the argument from motion. So when he says that, it's basically the same argument as to say, like, no matter how many rail cars you have, if you don't have the motive engine, it's not going to move.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter how many infinite series of explanations you have. If you don't have an original one to get the whole thing moving, it's not going to move at all. You won't have any
no
change.
matter how long I make the
Wait, you're saying,
paintbrush,
like-
it's not going to move itself. I need to have something to actualize that movement.
But it's always been moving.
Well,
No, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Yeah, and then
Sure it
how
is.
has it been moving?
Sure.
How was it?
It just
moving?
has been.
Which is
Just
always.
That's not how it works.
always has
No.
been.
That's illogical.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you.
Well, there's
What's the contradiction?
There's a couple approaches to it, right? There's like the state, like the claim that it's just always been doing that, or there's like a type of like symmetry with respect to cause and effect, right? So like the way that we perceive cause and effect goes in one direction towards the future, but it could be like there's a perspective in which that effects precede causes, and there's just like a symmetry there that we don't have access to with our
Quantum physics.
Look, man, that caboose is not moving if there's no engine. I don't care what you say. I mean, if that's what you have to swallow down to reject the argument, that's just too high a cost for me.
Why is that?
I mean, if you just saw an infinite train moving and they had no power to move it, then that would not make sense.
Well, see, you could have like an infinite chain, but there may be like novel things that happen, right? Not necessarily like the infinite chain is just like a series of like explanations. There could be just something that's beyond what you're talking about, and it's like novel, right? but like it's like an infinite novel series of not necessarily explanations, but just like I don't even know how to describe it necessarily, but like these explanations have a boundary of some sort, right? But there's still some type of further, beyond explanation type of metaphysical reality.
So you just appeal to the limitation of human knowledge or human ability to know.
Yep.
I mean,
that's fine. I mean,
if it's
people do that, but
I mean that's
I wouldn't
typically
do
what
that until I had
he
to,
is.
and I think this argument makes perfect sense. So I don't see why I
Yeah, no,
wouldn't
the
have to
thing
do
is that you're only doing it because you're only just making that your argument because you chose to make it. There's other more logical ways to go about thinking it. It's just you're appealing to that because you chose to do it.
Well, I'm proposing the option, and I'm just
Yeah,
wondering
and then
if
you're
there's like
choosing
an
that as
argument
the
against
option
it.
when there's no real reason to do it. When there's more logical options to choose.
Stop saying
Why
more
isn't
logic.
why?
But I did ask a question to the people
Why
who
can't I say
denied it.
logic, huh? What are you gonna police me? Come to
Because
my house?
it's not. Because what you mean is like more reasonable. You don't mean more logic.
No, I do mean more logical. You cannot
No,
like
there's
his
no, there's no
argument.
more.
His argument.
Sorry, there's no more or
His
less
argument.
logical, right? It either entails a contradiction or it doesn't.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe that's true. I don't know. You mean more rational?
Yeah, he means something. Yeah, like more reasonable, more rational. He doesn't mean more logical.
It has some more virtues as an argument. Like it's more parsimonious or something.
Whatever.
Something
Look, in the end of the day, this is just word.
Yeah. Well, I want to know
making
what you
less
guys.
reasonable argument.
I want to know what these people who are denying that every change needs a changer, or denying the PSR, like which things have you identified that don't need reasons, if any? And if not,
I've seen the flipping unicorn in the sky, man. I don't know where that one
if
came
you
from.
haven't identified any, why do you believe in them? Or like, does anybody have any examples?
Haven't identified any what?
All right, so if you're denying the PSR, or if you're saying that some potential can be actualized without an actualizer, or stick with the first one, if you're saying there are things without explanations, do you have any in mind, or are you just saying, like, if you're denying the
There are
PSR?
things that somebody might think are like possible ones, like Detroit said, like the fact that the universe exists, or like yeah, things like that. Right? But
If it doesn't,
it's not. I mean, it just doesn't matter. Like we could just say we don't really know.
Well, why did you pick that one instead of like that? That my computer is on has no explanation. What made you pick the one
Well,
than the other?
I guess the reason for the universe existing is just that it's hard to imagine what the reasons would be for it. But again, we could just say we don't know, right? What, like we don't know which fact.
If you're gonna pick the universe rather than my computer screen standing here, like, you should have a reason.
Well, again, we could just say we don't know which facts are brute.
correct.
Okay, so your argument is we pick the universe, and we could say that we just don't know. So you're saying that you just don't know, but that
Then
doesn't
you're not
prove it.
picking the universe if you're saying you just don't know.
But I mean, he
Correct.
stated a reason
I mean, the
for
thing
rejecting the
is, right,
PSR.
No,
about the universe is
he's
that
dealing in
he-
probabilities.
wait,
He's
wait,
not
wait.
dealing in absolutes. That's the
But he
difference.
still needs reasons for picking one over the other.
Like,
I'm not
Andrew,
picking any. Look, if somebody says we just don't know, we say you don't know which facts are brute. Like I don't.
Then if you don't know which facts are brute, then you don't know there's brute facts, and then you're not denying
yeah,
the PSR.
Wait, that's just retarded. What are you talking about?
If you don't, if you say I don't
Think
know,
about what you just said. Come on, I'm not even gonna explain why that's
Okay,
wrong.
okay.
Think about
Now
what you
you're
just
not
said.
arguing properly. Now you're saying that's just retarded. How
if
about
you
you use
say
your brain and then come to the logical conclusion?
you don't know if there's brute
I'm not
facts,
going to explain to you why that's wrong. It's obvious. Think about it for 2 seconds.
you
Well, wait,
misheard
everybody,
me.
wait.
Then you misheard me.
Brain's
Then
not
you
going
misheard
to
me.
leave the
Misheard
room
me.
and change my opinion if you just leave it to me to think about it myself.
I
You
think he
have
misheard what I said.
you have
Actually,
to convince me.
Try again, B3. Try again.
yes. So I'm saying, if you're just saying I don't know if there's brute facts, then you're not denying the PSR.
Nope, that's not what I'm talking about. You said the statement. If you don't know which facts are brute,
No,
then
that's
you
not
don't
what I
know
said.
that
That's why I
any
said you
No,
misheard.
he's telling you exactly what you said, B3. Listen.
No,
You said
that's not the case.
you said that if you don't know which facts are brute, then you don't know if the PSR is true.
That's not what I said.
Obviously retarded.
That's not
That
what I
is
said.
what you said. That is what you said.
You're conflating two different things that I said. I said earlier, if you don't know
No, that's
which
exactly
Dude,
what he said.
everybody heard you say it.
Just
Yeah.
I will
shut up.
explain
Let
what I
B3 explain himself.
Right.
Let
So
him
I said
clarify himself for the
I
sake
said
of
if
the
you
argument.
don't I said if you don't know why one fact is brute rather than another, then you really have no reason to believe it's brute. The other person replied, well, I could say I just don't know if there's brute facts or not.
Bro, you can't even track the conversation. This is not what happened.
What the heck?
Ad hominem. You're
You
saying
just said
you
two
can't
things
even
in the
do
same
something. Now
sentence.
you're attacking him, and you're
Right,
saying
so-
that,
But you
oh,
just
look at
contradicted
you.
yourself at
You
the same
cannot
time.
even do that. That is ad hominem.
Whether I misunderstood what you were to be saying, what my statement at the end was that if you don't know
Look.
there's brute facts, then you're not denying the PSR.
Look, this is. Let's
Do you
just
agree with
forget whatever anybody said. Yeah, if you don't know if there's brute facts, then you're obviously not denying the PSR. But here,
Okay, that's all I said. That's all I said.
that's not all you said. But let's just forget
It
that.
doesn't matter because I mean, were you calling me a liar? Like, no,
the-
I mean that's what I meant.
well.
Even if I said it wrong, that's what I mean. So
That's
do
a
it.
tautology, sir.
Here's the point.
But you
Wait,
basically
so
said
the
if you,
end goal. Wait,
oh
mate.
my
The
God,
end
this
goal
guy,
of
this
B3,
guy.
mate.
Here's
The
the
end
point.
goal of B3 was to say that you cannot deny PSR, and that's it. And now you're saying that that's not his end goal.
wrong. I
That was
can
the
deny
point that he was trying to make all along.
But he fucked
Well,
up by saying a tautology along the way. He said,
It
like,
doesn't matter. He clarified himself, and now you guys are trying to forget the subject, quote unquote.
When the person said that I could just say I don't know, I took them to mean that they just don't know if the if
I
there are-
explained what I said. I
whoever
said
that,
we
I
could
took-
just say
I
it was me, and I said we could just say we don't know which facts are brute.
Okay, that's fine. Well, I thought what you meant was that you just don't know if there are brute facts, and I think they're
No.
related in a way because if you don't know which facts are brute, then how do you know there are brute
You were
facts?
asking them for specific brute facts, right? And they said they don't know. So obviously they were they were answering that question.
So then there was
Sorry,
something in the middle.
there was a very simple answer to the question. Yes, you said
Sure.
if we don't know which facts are brute, how do we know there are brute facts? And the answer is
That's
just
what he
because the PSR entails modal collapse. So the PSR is false. The PSR being false entails there's brute facts.
That doesn't disprove the PSR. It would just prove modal collapse.
Oh my God, no! We're taking modal collapse. We're taking necessitarianism to be false, right?
No, we're not.
That's how I am. What are you talking about?
But that's that you'd have to have an independent argument for that. But that still wouldn't disprove just because you don't.
What are you talking about?
Just because you don't agree with necessitarianism.
Take the following argument, right? Necessitarianism is false. The PSR entails necessitarianism. Therefore, the PSR is false. What is confusing about this?
I don't think that's confusing. I think that's fine. But then
How does it not entail that the PSR is false?
Oh, fuck.
Hey, he wants an argument for.
But I didn't even know you were coming at it from that point of view with the necessitarianism.
Hey, he wants an argument against modal collapse, basically.
You would need a good argument against modal collapse, I guess.
No, I take necessitarianism to be false on some sort of like intuitive basis. I think most people.
And often these arguments end at our intuitions, and that's why philosophers continue to disagree about the same things for thousands of years.
Okay, but again, I think most people are going to accept what I'm saying. So I'm not sure
I think most people would also accept intuitively the argument from motion because it makes perfect sense. So you're going to have battling intuitions. Which one's more intuitively powerful?
I'm not sure it's true that most people.
Or perhaps maybe you're mistaken about that the PSR entails necessitarianism. It doesn't.
What are you talking about?
Think
it does. It's demonstrable.
Doesn't Craig and don't Craig and Proust both hold to a weaker form of the PSR that doesn't entail?
Well, now you're saying something different.
Right. So there are arguments that could bust up your premise that necessitarianism implies PSR is false.
Like they defend the premise that all contingent facts have explanations, right, or whatever.
But they both don't. That neither of one of them is a determinist or a necessitarian.
Proust wants to take explanation, I think, to be not entailing.
Okay, and he might be right and he might be wrong, but I mean, he's obviously not a stupid person.
Just means he doesn't really hold to the PSR.
So you say, but I mean, So he would
None of it leads to the absolute requirements of any of these theologies. So I don't even know what you're arguing.
There are going to be brute contingent facts on that view. Those are the ones that he's willing to accommodate.
Okay, and I would ask him the same question, like, which do you have any such facts in mind? Would there be any way to?
Well, typically they're going to say freely willed acts are examples of those.
Okay, and that's their view of libertarian free will. Like some other people might have a different view of free will that doesn't involve a totally I mean, some people, I guess you'd call them compatibilists, but like long before that term was coined, I think Aquinas would have said that that even freely chosen acts are still caused by the agent. I think he would have considered himself a compatibilist in the full sense, of the full modern sense. He would still
Well,
say,
I don't know how he can resist necessitarianism on that.
I guess he would say that God's act is free, and God has free will, even though He only does one act. Even
Wait,
though He
but
only
if God has compatibilist free will,
yeah,
then and God has the same nature in every possible world, then necessitarianism will hold.
yeah, I guess there's disagreement about that even among Thomists, but maybe it will.
Doesn't that just follow?
B3, what's your argument for the PSR, anyways?
What's what?
Your argument for the PSR again?
I'm not taking I'm not necessarily taking the position that the PSR is definitely correct or either version of it. We were relating it to the argument for motion or the actual saying it's sort of similar that every actualization of a potential requires an actualizer. It's kind of related to the PSR or it's similar, but I haven't read deeply about the PSR. I haven't read Pruss's books or anything, or if there's better treatments.
We have our own room now, the Vienna Circle room down below, where we can. It's like Darth Dawkins, right? Like we abuse people. In there.
Careful, B3. He's trying to get you alone in a room with him. I don't know if I'd.
I'm gonna be alone in a room soon because I'm getting really tired.
Yeah, go and actualize that potential to go to sleep.
I don't know if I will sleep. I have a hard time sleeping.
Oh, I said.
I'll just lay there.
You need Agnes to sing to you.
I guess I need Agnes.
Yeah, Agnes has the potentiality, but she hasn't actualized that yet. That's the issue.
Good night, guys.
Jane is here, man.
All right, good night. Have a good one.
It's just funny how at the end of every argument, someone just states that that's my metaphysical intuition. It's just that's philosophy.
Well, I don't think. I mean, there are
Bro, my metaphysical intuition is that 1
there
plus
are
1 equals
arguments
10,
against
bro.
PSR.
That's just my metaphysical.
Yeah, I don't doubt it,
intuition.
Jack. I'm sure there are.
It's like saying that's my opinion, but in a more big brain way, pretty much.
But that's what Craig does, and everyone does. Like,
But
that's just my opinion.
It is interesting that it's hard to think of a more minority view than necessitarianism in contemporary philosophy.
Jack, would you say that? Are you saying the same claim for the PSR?
No, what I'm saying is that if
You said there's 7 or 8 necessitarians, right?
Yeah, it's
well. How many
extremely
people hold the PSR?
Well, it's a tricky issue because
That is tricky.
people
It's a trick question.
people claim that they hold to the PSR when in fact they hold to a version of it that admits various brute contingencies.
I see what you mean. So,
But it's a good question how many people hold to the strong PSR and deny necessitarianism. I wonder what the number is.
That would be interesting. But the only brute contingencies people who are PSR advocates that you've mentioned was the free will one. Was there any others besides like maybe quantum events or?
Yeah, quantum events sometimes.
On some interpretations.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm sure Detroyer. Well, I mean, we know the world's expert on the PSR, so when he comes back to Discord, he can ask.
Because most atheists wouldn't be talking about free will if in their brute contingent list, right? Because most of them aren't going to believe that.
You're talking about libertarian. will, you mean?
Yep. Well, wouldn't it have to be libertarian free will to violate the PSR?
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, I thought maybe you were suggesting that if you're an atheist, you're, like, less likely to believe in libertarian free will.
I think probably you are. Yeah, I think more atheists would be compatibilists than theists, but maybe not.
Well, I think compatibilism is more popular among philosophers, and
In general.
so is and so is atheism. So there might be an overlap there.
I'm just trying to figure out how there's only 8 necessitarians, and yet there's all these other people, maybe thousands of them, who hold to the PSR that you say entails.
Well, the strong PSR.
Well, even the weak one. Like if these people
Well,
are
the weak one doesn't entail
right,
necessitarianism.
but if these people holding to the weak PSR are compatibilists, what other, and let's say they're also determinists about quantum physics. They think it's a deterministic explanation. What are they even having in mind then? As far
I
as
mean, usually it seems like the
explain that.
people who talk about the weak PSR are people who are using it in the service of a kind of contingency argument that wouldn't entail necessitarianism. But I don't know, maybe Detroyer knows of some other versions.
Right. So like if we remove the universe itself, I don't mean physically remove the, I mean if we take, let's list a few things: quantum events, the universe, and free events. If we take those 3 away, is there anything you could think of that would count as an uncaused, or something that these philosophers hold to be unexplained?
I'm not really sure what other facts they would appeal to as lacking explanations.
Mate, you're
What other
giving half-assed responses to B3.
Sorry?
I'm giving a half-assed response.
Yeah, you are. You're just saying I think.
Well, he might not know. But Jack, yeah. So I wonder if they're just rejecting necessitarianism because it's so uncomfortable. Like maybe do they really have good reason to reject it?
I doubt most of them have an argument. Probably most of them just think it's profoundly unintuitive.
Right. So like even if their beliefs added up to it, they might reject it anyway because it hurts. It's unintuitive, right?
Yeah, they would just say that
There
their
has to be
belief
something
that
wrong.
they'd say their belief that necessitarianism is false is held with greater confidence than any of the premises in a.
Yeah. And this is where everything with philosophy breaks down. Like we talked years ago about the Kalam and how like Craig has all these odd arguments that he uses for the Kalam, whatever, that nobody else holds, but he could just at the end of the day, he could just say, I have the most confidence in the Kalam. So there's no barometer.
Well, it's a little bizarre in Craig's case because it's not actually his belief in God that seems
I know. You told me that.
motivating it. Yeah.
But if he could just come around and say, I have the most confidence in all my beliefs is the Kalam, like, so I mean, there's no non.
It would be a hilarious thing for
There's
him
no
to
objective
say.
barometer. Sorry, but there's no objective barometer for why someone should have the most confidence in a particular metaphysical intuition, is there? All you could do is poll people at the end of the day.
Yeah, I don't think arguments should rely on intuitions for that reason.
Well, seems like they all do, though.
I don't know about that.
Well, like even in this case, like with the with the argument for motion or actualization of potential, like at the end of the day, Australia and myself will just say we feel a strong metaphysical intuition that there can't be this infinite regress, and you'll say, I don't feel such a strong metaphysical.
No, I think the PSR. I think necessitarianism is self-defeating. So I think.
I was talking back about the argument, the Aristotelian argument for motion or actualization of potential. It's different, right? It's different.
I'm just saying that I think that if there's an argument that the conclusion of which entails necessitarianism, that the argument can be rejected because necessitarianism is self-defeating.
So why do you reject the? I don't think that the argument for motion implies necessitarianism. I've never heard that it does. Do you think it does? Is that why you reject it?
I mean, it seems like it does require some kind of PSR because the idea is to deny that some actual things require an actualizer seems to be to deny some kind of principle of sufficient reason.
To deny that.
I think that's more or less how Phaser defends it in that discussion with Oppie. Maybe you remember that better than I do, Toby, because I think you watched the whole thing.
I've seen it. I forgot what you're
I didn't watch the whole thing. I watched like a lot of it, but
I've seen the whole thing.
all I remember from
It does seem like he's sort of was trying to defend the PSR, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I think that
causal
you can.
explanatory principle is always going to be defended in those types of arguments.
I think you can hold to the argument from motion and still believe God is an unexplained fact. So that wouldn't be necessitarian. He'd be brute, right?
Well,
usually God is taken to be necessary, but people talk about.
But you could still
brute
but you wouldn't have to be for that argument to work, right?
I'm not sure. I'd have to think about that. Maybe Detroyer has.
So if that is the case, that you could hold to that argument without committing yourself to the PSR, then that would not be a good. Then the fact that the PSR leads to necessitarianism wouldn't be a good objection to it.
Jack, you've said before you don't understand brute necessities, is that right?
I'm not really sure what is meant by that term.
Why is that? Like, what if somebody asked to explain why it's the case the law of non-contradiction is true?
Well, if you take a necessity to mean what holds in all possible worlds, right, then it's just going to be constitutive of your notion of necessity, that the law of non-contradiction. Sorry, if you take necessity to be what is holds what does not entail a contradiction, right? Sorry.
Sure.
Possibility, and is what does not entail a contradiction, right? Then it's just going to be constitutive. Then the law of non-contradiction is just going to be constitutive of your notion of necessity. So it would be sort of it's not really clear what it would mean to ask for an explanation of that. Do you see what I'm saying?
Kind of, although I suppose in some way that seems brute.
Well, if all we mean by necessary is that its denial would entail a contradiction, then how is it that we could say why is the law of non-contradiction necessary? Since all we mean by necessary is that its denial would entail a contradiction.
Yeah, I guess if somebody has to think that there's some broader kind of metaphysical necessity.
Exactly, yeah. And that I don't understand.
Metaphysical laws, bro.
Yeah, that's something else I don't understand. But that's something that Zach is fond of talking.
This is why metaphysics is just Dungeons and Dragons, bro.
Now you're talking.
That's what Durr said yesterday. He was like, epistemology is Harry Potter, metaphysics is Dungeons and Dragons.
To be honest, that's what I always liked about philosophy.
Like, you know, ethics is, I mean, it's like Lord of the Rings.
No, I don't think it could be Lord of the. Well, I guess you're right, maybe because they all sort of are about. I guess they're all about like kind of magic.
Yeah. What the hell? Durr is pinging me in Inner Circle saying sec. he's telling me to get in voice over there because Sec just said he loved me. What the fuck?
Wait,
I guess
why
we
would
have to go.
Don't you think he's just lying?
Wait, are you
Probably,
in
but
there,
we have to.
Miguel?
Am I
Somebody give Miguel an
Wait, to where?
to Vienna Circle.
Oh yeah, I left, so yeah, give me an invite. It's time to
Alright.
cultivate bad habits again.
Yeah, I'm gonna go in there and see what craziness they're doing.
It's a tranny party.
Mwah,
I reject your moi.